I've had this car running and driving for like 2 years now, and one of the more annoying things about it in terms of drivability is that pretty much nothing in this cluster works. Pretty much the only thing that does work is this fuel gauge, high beams, left turn, right turn. Pretty much nothing else works. Speedometer doesn't work. Because of that, the odometer doesn't work, so it's said the same mileage since I've had the car. I have no idea how many miles I've put on it. Tach doesn't work, and neither does the coolant temperature. In addition, pretty much every light on the thing is lit up. That's super annoying when you're driving at night. I've done some research into how to make some of these gauges work, and the amount of computers involved, it seems like it's pretty much just not worth it. So I think my plan is to just rip this cluster out and try to make a different one with some custom gauges so I have some kind of indicators when I'm driving the car. Okay, with that cluster out, there's a pretty good amount of space here in the dash to work, and that cluster mounts super easy. There's just two spots. Bolt goes here and one there. So I think I'm going to try and make a panel that fits in here that I can mount some custom gauges in. Alright, I've been messing with these cardboard templates for a little while, and I don't think I'm going to get one to fit as well as I want it to. I feel like there's always going to be a gap around this edge, and the plan was to transfer one of these to metal and then cut it out and make tabs to mount in these holes. I don't think that's going to look that good. So that kind of got me thinking what would have a factory look, and I was like, well, I could just try to put my factory or my aftermarket gauges in this factory cluster. Looks like it comes apart here on the back. Just a couple screws, and once that's apart, these gauges are pretty much just circular to begin with. I feel like I could maybe try to make a mount to try to fit some aftermarket gauges right in this cluster. That way around the edge will be a nice factory fit, and my gauges will have somewhere to rest. So I think that's what I'm going to try. I don't want to cut up this factory cluster in case I ever need to put it back in the car for whatever reason, so I think I'm going to hit a junkyard and grab another one to try putting those gauges in. Okay, that came apart super easy, and this is pretty much exactly what I was looking for. We got a nice base here to start installing some gauges on the back here. Basically got 4 perfect circles that should accept some aftermarket gauges pretty easy. I think now I'm going to try to make some kind of mount that utilizes these 7 mounting points, and I'll basically make like a frame that'll mount to these points and then hold my gauges in the places that I want. This all-in-one circuit board is pretty cool. Looks like it's just got some stepper motors on the back and a bunch of different electrical components. It's weird to see it outside of the cluster. I'm sure you're not supposed to do this, but looks like the Speedo's got a hard stop. I don't know, what's that, like 160, 180? I don't know, pretty ambitious thinking this car ever gets to that. Could have stopped it way back here, probably. Okay, here are the gauges I got. I got both these gauges on Amazon. They're pretty standard gauges. This one on the left here, this tack. Basically, I just wanted them to match in terms of having a black face and both be LED lit. Tack goes to 8,000 RPM. That's about right. My engine doesn't really go over 6, so like kind of displacement-wise, that'll look about correct. Just a standard tack for an 8-cylinder engine. And the speedometer, this is actually a GPS speedometer. So on the back here, there's this like coax looking cable that goes in. That's for this GPS sensor. So this doesn't need any wheel speed or anything like that. Just put power to it and the thing should connect to the GPS signal and then read out speed. So we'll see how that works. Both these gauges actually did come with their own housings and mounting assemblies, but I don't need any of that, so I just stripped them down all the way as much as I could get them to just bare gauges. So that's what we got here. So basically just have to draft up a bracket to hold these gauges in these positions or close to it, and we'll be in business. That one doesn't stay right now, but those holes are very close, so I'm going to make a bracket to use these mounting points and hold those gauges in place. I think the easiest way to make my bracket is probably going to be to try and 3D print one. I could try to do it out of like aluminum sheet metal or something, but one, drilling all these holes evenly is not going to be easy to line up with all these different points, and also I want to have some control over like the depth from like the metal plate to where in the face those gauges will land. I want them to line up kind of with the factory lip, the factory edge. So I'm going to try to 3D print something, so I'm going to jump over to CAD. Okay, I'm working in SolidWorks here and I'm designing that bracket. Pretty much what I have here is the base sketch. You just pick a surface you want to draw on, and then you start drawing, and then from there you can extrude or cut away to make the bodies of your model. So what I got here are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 circles. Those are going to represent the bolt holes that will mount into the factory cluster. And then I got dimension lines in between all of those 5 mounting points with respect to each other. I measured those mounting holes on the factory cluster, and then I dimensioned them, and that fixes all 5 of these points in space with respect to one another. Next I got these 2 circles drawn in this same sketch, and those represent the circles of the actual cutout in the cluster where the gauges are going to kind of fit through. For this first couple attempts, I'm just going to put these circles for the gauges where I think they go. I measured them as close as I can with offsets from the mounting holes. They're not going to be perfect, but as I do a couple 3D prints, I'll continuously make them closer and closer until they fit well. So with this sketch turned off, you can kind of start building on your model from there. So this is the first kind of version. It's just got some thickness, so I can get some tolerances and clearances sorted out. Got these holes for the screws they're going to go through to mount to the cluster, and then I also have these holes where the gauges go. Made it thicker. Added a lip on the back. This is mostly just because it's going to save on print time. You don't want to have this thickness the entire way if you don't need it. Then I trimmed away the face here. This is going to be the speedometer side, and the lip on that front face is going to sit in that groove. Looks like I added some thickness to this bolt hole. not sure what that changed. Looks like we added thickness again here. I might have been doing that to a couple of them. And then that was a significant change there. This is the tack side. That's going to be that back face where the tack sits against. Added some more thickness to make up for the additional thickness on the tachometer. Added these screws on the outlet on the outside edge. There's going to be 3 of them, 1, 2, 3, and those are the set screws to hold the tack in place. Here's the pattern that does that. So I had the 1 and just patterned the other 3 or 2. Trimmed off part of this lip just because the cluster gets close there, so that's for clearancing. And then the last part, cut a square hole in this face, and that allows the circuit board and the tack to fit through. And there's the complete model. Gonna go ahead and get that 3D printed. Okay, I got my first test print done here. Came out pretty good. And looks like most of the measurements and tolerances that I needed are pretty solid. So I was pretty much trying to get these circles centered on the circles on the cluster, and then also all 5 mounting points. I had to get those correct in space as well. So it looks like this fits pretty good. All those holes are lining up. Alright, a bunch of test prints later, and I finally think I got the one that's going to work. So this is the final product here. Probably the most annoying thing about this was that these gauges actually have different methods of mounting. So this speedometer is pretty nice. It came with this bracket that bolts onto the back, and the way it mounts is you pretty much sandwich your mounting surface in between the bracket and the lip on this speedometer. So that one was pretty straightforward. The tack, on the other hand, there is no mounting points on this thing anywhere. So this one had to be a press fit. It presses into the bracket, and then I have set screws around the outside that hold it in place. One more thing that's a little bit cool about this bracket, obviously it's asymmetric, they mount differently. This is for the speedometer, this is for the tack. Is this star cutout in the background, and that's because the circuit board has to fit through, so and still allow the press fit on the outside edge of the speedometer. So I'll just put these together here, just like this. Circuit board goes through. Once it's through, you can clock it to center. Got a nice press fit. And then the speedometer actually goes in the opposite direction, so it goes in from the front. The lip catches nicely there. Get it centered. And then this bracket in the back sandwiches it on. Alright, and now these 2 gauges are ready to get mounted in the cluster. Well, that's upside down. All right, I got those flipped around, and I'm happy with how those look. Those are pretty good. And here's the back side. Everything all mounted, nice and solid. Let's go ahead and get it wired up. Okay, I got these gauges wired up, and it was actually pretty straightforward. There's 3 wires that each gauge shares. They both have ground, 12-volt power in, and a signal wire that tells the LEDs to turn on. So because those are all the same signal, essentially, I took the wire from each gauge, ran them together, twisted them together, and then soldered them onto one of the blade connectors. This 4th wire here, this is the tach input signal for the tachometer. So that's just one extra wire that runs to the tach gauge. And that should do it. I got all the wiring run up to the cluster that I'm going to need for those gauges. So I got 12-volt power that comes from that relay box that I installed. I got a ground wire that runs to a good ground in the car. This blue wire is a tach signal that comes from the ECM. And then we got another red wire. This comes from the tap that goes to the radio, and when the headlights are turned on, this will get 12 volts, and that will turn the LED lights on in the gauges when the headlights come on. And then the last signal wire is the GPS signal. That comes from the GPS module I mounted on the dash, and that feeds into the speedometer. And then up top there, here we got the GPS module to feed the speedo. All right, there it is installed. Let's go take it for a ride, see if it works. All right, I'm going to give it a first start up and see if everything's working. All right, looks like that tach's working. Reading like just over 1,000 RPMs on the Holley. Got it like 1,100, 1,200, so that seems to be working. The tach, I read that it's got to connect to one of the nearest satellites, so it takes a second. I think that's what that countdown is there. It's counting down. At some point that'll connect. We'll see that on the road test. But yeah, tach seems to be working. While I'm here, I'm going to test the backlights, see if those work. Got key on now. Tach goes to 0. Headlight switches, and there we go. Sucks are different colors. I think I'll change the LED in one of those at some point, but I don't know if I like the orange or yellow better. On a test drive here, looks like everything's working. We got tach and speedo. The speedo's a little slow, but it's better than nothing for sure. When you're in bad signal areas, like you can see just there, it lost signal, but it does come back, and in terms of how responsive it is, it's really not that bad. Like I'm stepping on it a little bit here. It does take a second, but it tells you how fast you're cruising, and that's kind of all I care about, honestly. Speedo and tach both working good. I'm pretty happy with these. I definitely got to change the color though. That orange and yellow being different is annoying.